And we are back, folks, on another edition of the Michigan Recruiting Insider Spring Practice Weekend, Big Visit Weekend number 3, I think. I mean, it's running together because this spring visit, this spring recruiting cycle is so much different from last year's. I remember earlier this week talking about it with Bryce. Like, it just seems like something happened, a switch flipped. I don't know if it's new staff members. I don't know if they have a brand new bag. I don't know what it is. But Michigan recruiting, as far as visitors and buzz, is on a totally different level this spring. Joining me as they do every single week is the best crew in the land when it comes to talking to Michigan athletics, football, basketball, and recruiting over at the MichiganInsider.com. Starting off first with Steve Lorenz. Steve, how are you?
Good. Yeah, props to the staff. I mean, yeah, things are a lot different. Makes our job easier, I think. Not digging the bottom of the well to find stuff to talk about and write about. So, yeah, should see the momentum continue as the month finishes out too.
Yeah, and Bryce, I remember last year at this time, we were on a struggle bus, man, trying to figure out, what do we talk? And we didn't sugarcoat it. We said, hey man, this is not a good cycle, a good start to the cycle for Michigan. And it wasn't. This is totally different.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too is look at how many guys they're getting, but also of quality. It's not just quantity, it's quality of guys they're getting as well. And there's a lot of top targets coming to campus earlier. And I think it's resonating. I mean, we're going to probably talk about the coaching staff a little bit more, but Kirk Campbell, CP, these new hires are really hitting home runs early. So that's a good start for them as well.
Yeah, and then you got guys, long-standing guys like Clink Scale, of course, Jay Harbaugh, Ron Bellamy. Sure, I mean, the guys who always have done it are still here doing it, and it's really adding up to a team that's building the right kind of momentum. And just to recap a little bit, last week and last episode, we talked about who we put in a crystal ball for. The guy that I picked was Aaron Chiles. That is not, I'm still in the window where it counts if I put one in this week, which I actually anticipate doing right now. He had a great visit to Michigan. Dad came up this time, rave reviews to people in their circle. It was a fantastic visit for Aaron Chiles. I just want to check in, pipe in with other members of his circle before I go putting in a crystal ball, which I will be doing today in the story to come over the MichiganInsider.com. I felt like Michigan had a lead heading into the visit, Steve, and now it's a matter of, do I think that lead is so much that it's crystal ball time? It's going to be, it's going to take some work to move Michigan out of the leadership off the leadership perch. I'm close to that. I just want to talk to a few more people first, but still feeling really good about Aaron Chiles in Michigan.
Yep, I think really what we thought Michigan led before. The question was George Helo's out, Chris Partridge in. As long as Michigan kind of rebuilt that bond between prospect and position coach, that we thought Michigan not only might be in the same spot they were, but even better, just because we know how effective of a recruiter Chris Partridge is. And it really sounds like Michigan did that, plus some. I put one in on Saturday night or Sunday morning. I can't remember. But yeah, it sounds like it's going to take quite a bit for another school to overcome Michigan. He has mentioned taking some other visits. I think Notre Dame, Florida. I think there's another program in there he's looking at checking out. Coming back to Michigan again, though. So, remains to be seen. Do those other visits end up taking place in June? I think that'll be interesting. But either way, it sounds like Michigan really knocked it out of the park. And we've talked about how important he is from a position standpoint and the school he goes to, too. There's a lot of other guys from good counsel giving Michigan a close look. So very important recruit for Michigan for a multitude of reasons.
Well, I talked to a person, close to the family, talks to him a lot, talked to him after the visit, just to get the feel for what they were saying coming off the visit. And I will pull up that message right now, but it says it's a done deal. They are loving Michigan. They think Nick should have went there, right? That's now again, that's not them saying it though. It's not them saying it, which is why I'm not going so far as to put in a crystal ball. That's just the vibe coming off the visit, which is making me feel really good, feeling really close to the crystal ball. But I have to, me, I'm very conservative with mine. Want to talk directly to folks in the circle before I go, and over the ledge, over the hump, so to speak. And I have yet to do that, but I will be doing that here in the next day or so. So stay tuned for a piece coming up over on the MichiganInsider.com. One guy I did move, over the hump with, a guy who I felt like Michigan has been leading for some time. And I was hearing that same kind of buzz with Brice, was Brian Robinson. But this last visit, his 8th visit to Michigan, and the longest of the 8 visits, here for 4 days, 3 practices, meeting with all the coaches, connecting with the players and the recruits. Coming off of that visit, yeah, I had to put in a crystal ball for Michigan.
No, this is one that's been long awaited for, I think. I mean, he's been in the studio as many times as any guys we've had. And I know how his dad feels about the program, even though he won't get on camera. We all know, at least Sam and me, know how he really feels about Michigan. But I think it's more, when we first looked at his recruitment, everyone just said, oh, well, we got Steve Clinkscale, the Youngstown guy. It's that relationship. Michigan's going to be hard to beat because of that. But it's much deeper than that, Sam. And when we release the full interview on the Michigan Insider on YouTube, you'll see why. He's got a relationship with Mike Elston, the defensive line coach, and he said how he's part of the family. He even knows his family as well, his girls and everything, how they sit in the film room and meetings and time from time. And Dylan Roney, the guy, the GA, a guy that he's really connected with as well. And even the players, when he comes up there, the biggest thing I took away from his trip to the studio was when he said he goes to Schembechler Hall, it feels like a home away from home. They're not asking him, hey, where are you going? What are you doing? What do you need? How you feeling? Good to see you again. Why haven't you committed? Jokingly. So this is a guy I think they really like. They've been on him extremely long. Physically impressive athlete. I think now he's what, Sam, 6'5", 260. He just keeps bulking up every time we see him. And he's just someone I think that kind of fits the mold of what they want off the edge. I mean, the crazy part is, and he was telling us this, that some schools are recruiting him at outside linebacker. I mean, he's that much of an athlete. I think Michigan likes him closer to the line of scrimmage, but physically impressive, physically gifted, and one of those guys where you talk to him on camera and even off camera, you have to be impressed. He fits what Michigan looks for in their student athletes. And this right now feels like Michigan's the team to beat in that race.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question. I really don't. I think the squad that's the closest in contention is Kentucky. Penn State is making a push, and I don't want to call it a slam dunk because he's doing his due diligence as far as getting out on visits. But here's the thing, and Steve, you could appreciate it because you talked about this before. He's a footprint guy. He's a really good guy in Ohio, right? A guy that's coveted by teams all over the country, but Ohio State hasn't offered. And while he won't say it publicly, man, I think that is a big chip on his shoulder. Like, I think that dude wants to give it to Ohio State. And those are the dudes, I mean, you like to get the guys that take it personally. And Brian Robinson, super nice kid, very, very yes, sir, no, sir, respectful. But you put him on the football field, he flips that switch, and he definitely, let me tell you, Brice, you can attest to this. When it comes to Ohio State thinks they could just come in at the end. And I get it. For years, they could. Urban Meyer gets there. He prioritized 5 stars all over the country, and he would put like some of the lower rung 4-star guys at Ohio State or in the state of Ohio on the back burner. He'd come back in the end and he could still get them. Now Michigan is breaking a foot off up in there. And it's not the same. Now, guys are seeing, wait, there's an alternative that's just as good, if not better. If Ohio State doesn't want to come for me right now, then I got someplace else I could go that's just as good, and I can give it to them. And I think Brian Robinson is feeling like that, Steve.
Yeah, that's what I think we talked about before. It's kind of an interesting spot now it is, because Michigan, even you mentioned Kentucky, Penn State, those schools have made so much headway that Ohio State's kind of in a weird spot. I've always kind of wondered sometimes if there are certain guys that Ohio State is convinced they might not get in state. I think they abstain from offering because they don't want to create the perception that Michigan or Penn State or whoever is beating them for a recruit. I mean, Robinson's got like the two I mentioned, but he's also got Notre Dame, he's got Georgia, he's got Texas A&M, he's got Tennessee, he's got USC. Michigan, far from the only elite program that has interested in him and has offered him. So, if it feels like it'd almost be too late now for Ohio State to get in, right? So I think it is. I'd be surprised if it stemmed the tide that Michigan has built in this individual recruitment. But either way, yeah, with that, Michigan getting a guy like you said, Sam, who comes in without that Ohio State offer, with that chip on their shoulder, so kind of a win-win for Michigan either way in that regard. So you're getting a very talented kid. And I think Bryce mentioning that some schools are looking at him as an outside linebacker is actually great for Michigan if they want to play him at edge. It's those athletes that they've turned into stars at the spot, right? So not a guy that they're going to slim down or anything. Probably a kid who's probably going to come in, could probably play about at the weight that he's at right now. They could even maybe bulk him up a little bit if they wanted to. So, this one's it feels like it's been trending mostly Michigan for a while. I think, I see Kentucky and Penn State are mentioned as warm in his profile, but Kentucky's been the other school. I think that's been the consistent factor. But for Michigan, I think you hope it's the start or continuation. I mean, you already have Luke Hamilton on board, but there's other guys in Ohio too, so where Michigan is really starting to make an actual dent in the state of Ohio and really, capitalizing on 2 wins in a row over the Buckeyes.
Yeah, so the obvious question, and I'm sure you guys are seeing it on the board, people are like, okay, he visited 8 times. He's saying all these glowing things about Michigan. I already put up a snippet of it. We'll put up the full interview. But you got to kind of have to know him a little bit to understand that this is, as a family and as a kid, they are very regimented. Like what you can see on Twitter, like 3 square meals, certain number of calories a day. Like there is he has literally a binder, sort of a physical profile of nutrition and physiology and metrics and bars that he needs to hit by. You need to be at this, you need to be eating this many calories, this many times a day, by this point in the year to be at this kind of weight. And here's your body mass index. And here's what it is relative to other kids your age and bone density. I say all of that to say the guy has a checklist. And every single box on that checklist has to be checked. One school, they've since checked it, but he goes on his visit to Penn State. His dad told this story, Bryce. They went on a visit to Penn State. I guess it was last year. They're walking around going on a tour with the parents. And they said, okay, they're taking the parents on the academic tour. He said, when does my son see it? Well, he doesn't see it until the official visit. He said, okay, visit over. We're done. So what do you mean visit's over? We're done. Well, we, on our list, we want to have the academic tour well before the official visit. So because of that, visit's over. So you can see with something like that, when you are that regimented, when everything has to be in line, every box has to be checked, you understand why he's taking so many visits. So what's left to see at Michigan? He hasn't had the dorm tour, right? That it may seem like this small thing, but for them, that's how they are. But here's the flip side, and Steve pointed this. He said, you just said it. I don't know if Ohio State, even if they got in right now, if they can make up ground. I think you're 100% right, because I don't think they have enough time to check all the boxes that he wants checked. Kentucky could, Penn State could, but I just think the relationships, the familiarity, and the comfort is too great. Here's the other thing, though, Bryce, and you can appreciate this. One thing that could speed him up when it comes to maybe going to check out that dorm visit or, figuring out that last piece of the puzzle with Michigan is what's going on elsewhere. What's going on with a kid like the catalyst, the domino, if you will, in Jadyn Davis, who hits campus on another loaded visit weekend, the most loaded visit weekend of the spring. We're anticipating this weekend, and Jadyn Davis will be back on campus.
Yeah, so you going back to Brian for a quick second, you tossed a hypothetical of a hypothetical 5-star quarterback was looking at Michigan, and he decided, or not Michigan, but a school, and he picked a school that you were looking at. Would that alter or impact your timeline or anything like that? And he's like, he just gave a big smile. It's like it might rush it, speed it up a little bit and stuff like that. So, and here's the thing, we've been talking about the impact of like a Jadyn Davis if he did commit to Michigan on both sides of the ball. He can impact a class from offense to defense. And with him coming up this weekend, which makes, I want to say, 4th, 5th time. I mean, he's been up a few times. He's seen a couple game days. He's been here during the offseason. And now the biggest thing with this is he's going to meet new quarterbacks coach Kirk Campbell. And the thing that's really impressive to me about this goes to Bryce Underwood, who's a 5-star quarterback right here in the state of Michigan at Belleville High School, Sam, that you wrote a piece on, and how he came up on a visit and his father admitted to you that there wasn't much traction happening between Michigan and just their family. It was not clicking. And I hate to, and no offense, but Matt Weiss was just not getting it done. It just was not happening. And he comes up on a visit, and I'm not saying it's a courtesy visit, but it's close, right? Why not? Let's go to Ann Arbor. He comes up, and instantly he hits it off. Bryce hits it off with Kurt. And the biggest thing that really got me with that story was his father said, man, he had a plan. Like, you could see he had a plan. He laid out how he'd be used in the offense. This is what we're going to do with you. And everything was set up perfectly. And on top of that, it was just they bonded. They hit it off right away. And I think that's the thing looking forward to this Jadyn Davis visit. How is that going to happen going into this trip? And that's a big thing to watch.
Yeah, it's interesting how people process information, right? I think it's often the case people believe what they want to believe, even though you're giving them a sort of perspective. I mean, I go back to the Dante Moore commitment or recruitment, and people were just convinced that was all about NIL. I mean, you had to be naive to think that wasn't part of it, but it was very clear. It was very clear that his relationship or lack thereof with Matt Weiss is part of it. And it's not to rag on Weiss. I mean, I think, certain guys are just certain fit for certain levels. I think he's a pro coach. I don't think college recruiting is his thing. When you combine college recruiting not being his thing with, he's kind of a Ben Stein type of dude, right? I mean, he's just not a very gregarious guy. Those two ingredients don't add up to stellar recruiter. And so, man, I'm sure you, Bryce and Steve, have been in a situation where you had to water down an interview, not where you change what they, you change what they say. But I mean, Bryce's dad, Jaquan, there was some S-bombs and F-bombs and different kind of bombs for emphasis that I had to move out of there to just where he was expressing himself about how different they felt dealing with Kirk Campbell compared to Matt Weiss. So different that instantly Michigan became more of a factor. Now, here's the perspective that we have to offer, Bryce and Steve. It is a great sign that Michigan is now a factor, a clear factor for one of the top prospects in the country, regardless of class. What you also have to take into account is a lot of this effect is you got to give Kirk Campbell a lot of credit for being that kind of personality, being a quarterback guy, being able to articulate a plan and connect. But a big part of this, Steve, is also he's not Matt Weiss. I think the disdain for Matt Weiss was so clear that I think it could have been anyone. And this is not to say that Kirk isn't. Kirk is really good so far from everything we can find out. But hell, it could have been a paper bag that they went to meet with, and I think they would have said, "Hey, it's so much better, right?" That's at least that's how I came away from it.
I mean, there was no chemistry with Coach and Bryce at all. We would basically just sit in the meeting and look at each other. We'd ask questions, and the questions would get answered in a way that nobody could understand what the hell he was talking about, to be honest. Like, I don't really know. And that's the published version, right? I mean, yeah. Again, we alluded to it with the Jadyn Davis stuff, but you know, on top of Bryce Underwood, who is coming back, twice?
Right.
In the next 3 weeks?
First, yeah.
Which is massive. You know, Michigan hosted like 12 quarterbacks. Or is hosting like 12 or 13, right? In the next like 2 weeks or so. They're hosting they're hosting most of their major 25 targets. They're hosting a couple of the 26 guys they've already offered. I mean, I don't know, since I've been doing this, if I've ever seen such a night and day transformation at a position in such a short amount of time. It used to be a huge deal when any offered quarterback prospect would come to campus for a visit, right? I mean, whether it was a top guy or not, it was always a huge deal when any quarterback target came up. So the fact that you know, under Kirk Campbell, Michigan is getting not just Bryce Underwood, not just Jadyn Davis, but some of these other guys, the George McIntyres, the Cutter Bowleys, the was it Smeagol, the 26 kid out of California who's already got an offer. You know, the fact they're getting all these guys up, I mean, it's just like any other position. That's what you need. You want to get as many guys up. We were even talking about some of the maybe guys who aren't ranked as high or don't have the offers yet. You know, you're talking about potential PWO candidates. You could even go as far as saying you're talking about guys, say they go to a smaller school and end up blowing up. You're talking about guys down the road that could be transfer portal targets. Honestly, you know, I mean, just building as many relationships as you can at such an important position just seems like a very logical move for Michigan. And yeah, I mean, Campbell just seems to be knocking it out of the park so far with the top targets, but also in just getting a plethora of guys up at the position and just building as many relationships as possible.
Yeah, you got to give Kirk a ton of credit. I fully anticipate he is going to be a resounding there are going to be resounding rave reviews for him from Jadyn Davis. I mean, you heard JJ express just how much he loves the dude and campaign for the guy. He finally got a chance to speak publicly about it. That's what he's been saying behind the scenes. It's what his family's been saying. It's what they've been telling recruits. It's what what they were telling Davises. I mean, everything that you heard Underwood express, right? That's the kind of vibe, at least with the difference. Maybe not with the same sort of flavor to the description of the difference, but just the magnitude of the difference has been expressed by everyone. And again, I mean, clearly he has some redeeming qualities as a coach, analytics, right? Run game guy, but I think he's a pro guy. You know, recruiting is a part of the game in college, and that just wasn't his thing. I mean, think about this, because guys who've been killing it, Steve Klinkscale, we just talked about him with Brian Robinson. Man, he had to call over and over again to get the Underwoods to come on that visit last week. It's like, hey, I need y'all up here. It's like, all right, coach. Called him back. I need you guys to commit. Okay, and they're blowing Klink off, sort of, you know, kind of slow playing him. He keeps calling. Hey, you know what? And then finally on Friday, man, I need y'all. Man, I need you to say that you're coming. I need you here. And they finally said, okay, Klink. And if you want maybe a vivid example of the difference between a pro guy and a college guy, it's that. See, a pro guy calls a guy like the Underwoods, or calls a father like Jaquan Underwood and says, hey, we love you. We want you to come. And if he doesn't get that same kind of vibe back, same kind of feeling back, so, man, the hell with that dude. And he's done. The college guy, the recruiter, he keeps calling. He understands that part of college recruiting is you might have you kiss. It's a kiss behind kind of deal, right? To a certain extent, you got to keep calling, even when they are showing you the reciprocity. You got to stay on them. You got to keep recruiting them. You got to convince them I need you here. And then once they get there, now maybe you can sway them to the point where they start giving you that type of rhythm back, like is what's happening with Bryce Underwood. That's the difference to me, anyway. When you talk about Matt Weiss, that was not his thing to do, to kind of be on a guy that wasn't giving him that kind of rhythm back. Jadyn did, and that was the thing. As he showed that interest in Jadyn was giving it back, and so it encouraged him to recruit with intensity, to be persistent, to not get turned off when they said, "Oh, you're a terrible recruiter," because they were giving him some love back. So again, you can't be driven by that as a college recruiter, and that's a testament to Clink that he was still able to get that dude on campus. Because if he just called once, the Underwoods wouldn't have come to campus, fellas. But speaking of guys coming to campus, we led off with Jadyn Davis. Huge visit for him. There are going to be several other guys on campus this weekend, following up last weekend when you had other guys like Channing Goodwin, who I think they moved the bar even farther down the line with. Jordan Shipp, they moved the ball farther down the line with. There are a lot of guys, but many, many more this week, Bryce. I mean, there's a litany. You almost lose track of how many big timers are going to be on campus this weekend.
It's a lot. Let's start off with Jordan Marshall, a guy that, again, we've been talking about Ohio so much. Well, you're going to one of the best players from the state of Ohio back on campus. There's going to be several other Ohio guys, but top 100 running back recruit that Mike Hart has been all over. He's got a top 4 with Michigan included. This is kind of a pivotal visit, in my opinion, because right now they really need to impress these running back recruits. We've been talking about the emphasis on getting a top-notch running back. And Jordan Marshall fits the bill, kind of like what they've gotten in years past with Donovan Edwards. I look at him in that regard. I think he's that good, that talented. Ohio State is pushing for him extremely hard. I know he likes Tennessee, Wisconsin, the top 4. You can see kind of the trend of those 4 schools. They like to run the ball, maybe more so Michigan and Wisconsin. But he's looking at all 4 schools. I know he is going to take official, and he's laid out those plans in June. One of them will be to Michigan. But this is good to set the foundation. They kind of already have a little, but they can build upon that. So he's one guy. Darian Dupree, another guy from the Midwest. He's borderline. I think he's a 3-star, but he might be moving up to a 4-star status. A running back from Mount Carmel, Illinois. Super talented, has dozens of offers. A guy that Mike Hart extended offer to back earlier in the winter. A guy I know they really like. This will be his first trip up to campus. And then maybe another in-state guy that people should been, everyone's asking about, but he never talks, is Brady Prescorn, the top 100 tight end, who's got, again, close to 30 offers, but he will be up on campus Sunday. He's formed a great relationship with tight ends coach Grant Newsome. And this is a guy, I think, you talk about guys you really need to land in the class. This is a guy you need to land. And pairing him up with Hogan Hansen from Washington would be a great pairing, a great stabilizer for this class, and a guy that, Sam, maybe they can, I don't know, in the same room, Jadyn Davis and Brady Prescorn, and kind of, hey, what do you think about teaming up together? So that's something to watch, and there's going to be a lot more guys as well coming up this weekend as well.
Steve, you can kind of carry us into some other names on this absolutely loaded list, but I know you're on the board a lot, and Brady Prescorn, like Brian Robinson, is another one of those guys. People keep asking, what else did you need to show the guy? He's been to campus so many times. They clearly are high on the list. Now, difference with Brady, one of the differences with Brady is he doesn't talk a lot. So it's harder to pinpoint exactly what else it is he needs to see. But we can clearly understand that Michigan is very high on his list. And I remember going to see him last fall. He told me that he has a great relationship with Grant Newsome.
Yeah, Prescorn just released a top 8. I don't know if that's exactly where his recruitment stands. Some big-time schools in there, too. Remember, he's a top 100 kid. He's got all of the offers pretty much, right? And he a kid that kind of keeps to himself. So, hard to know exactly where he is as far as the process goes. But, yeah, we know Michigan strongly in the running there. And another kid, I think Sam, when you saw him, he was more impressed, right? Was he more impressive when you saw him? His junior film really pops. I mean, that would be a kid that, like Bryce said, a great complement to what they already have with Hogan Hansen. So yeah, Prieskorn, Blake Frazier, another huge one. The Michigan legacy, really probably, I think we mentioned, along with Andrew Sprague out of Kansas City, probably top 2 offensive line targets they have remaining. Dylan Stewart, the 5-star edge out of DC, is scheduled to be on campus. That's one kind of your typical 5-star situation. I think Michigan going to shoot their shot, going to take a swing, see if they, I'm assuming, spring goal is to try to win one of the official visits, I would imagine. I mean, again, maybe he's a kid that's going to take a while, but big timer. Darian Mayo, we talked about Aaron Chiles out of Good Counsel. Darian Mayo, 4-star edge, one of my favorite players they're recruiting, just learning the game, but just really unique to some of the edges that they're recruiting. He's more of your super lengthy type guy. Another one feels like he's early on in the recruitment. We talked a lot about Bryce West out of Glenville and Cleveland. Well, the other Ohio corner, Aaron Scott out of Springfield, he's supposed to be up on campus as well. I think there's some debate which one of those guys is actually, I know what West is ranked higher. I think there are some people that think Scott is almost as good. I think Ohio State's the primary competitor in both of those races. And then new name, Michael Boganowski out of Junction City, Kansas, 3-star linebacker, one of the first outside type linebackers that Chris Partridge has offered since taking the job. I think he's a guy that Michigan really looking forward to getting to see in person, and could become a name that we're going to be talking more about depending on how that visit goes. So yeah, I don't even think that's really all of the guys, but those are probably the big ones. It is, though. It's an impressive month all the way around, but I agree with you guys. I think this weekend is probably the one that, I think it's the one that has the most names that are most likely to maybe end up there's a lot of guys on this list that may end up in the class if Michigan can finish out and can recruit some of these guys the way they have been. So a really big weekend for Michigan in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, you got to give the recruiting staff, the coaching staff, a ton of credit for just whatever changes they need to make. Some of it's personnel, but some of it is the guys who are there just flat doing a better job. And kudos to them for just improving on the job, right? So, but you get back to Brady Prieskorn, going to see him play. I watched him play against West Bloomfield, and he gave me T.J. Hockenson vibes. I mean, he's a guy who catches the football really well, but knows how to get open. Can set up DBs or linebackers, with double moves, and can get open. I just, he's a dude, man, and he didn't do well in one-on-ones against Amir Herring. Amir Herring I remember talking to Amir. Amir is not a boastful dude. He was like, all right, man, I dominated that guy. But he gave him credit. Because when Amir got his hands on him, I mean, you just aren't getting past Amir Herring if you're Brady Prieskorn. What I liked about Brady is he did not stop. He kept coming. So he's going to get bigger and stronger, and he's not going to be a defensive end going against a 315-pounder anyway. He's going to be a tight end that's going against linebackers and safeties. And I just like the mentality that he brings to the fold. And tight ends are always going to have a role both as blockers and as pass catchers in this offense, which is a great segue talking about pass catchers after this break. I kind of talked about a few. We'll get to some specific recruitments when we return on the other side here on the Michigan Recruiting Insider. And we are back, folks, here on the Michigan Recruiting Insider. So, Bryce, you did a story on a receiver who visited Michigan, young man named Mekhi White, and he has been the source of a lot of buzz in recruiting circles here over the last couple of days, which begs the question. You didn't put in a crystal ball. I didn't put in a crystal ball. Steve didn't put in a crystal ball. Why, pray tell, Mr. Marich, after doing a story, are you taking a kind of pumping the brakes on the momentum, if you will?
So let's talk a little about him. His name is Mekhi White. He's from King George. He's a 3-star out of the state of Virginia, and he's in the 2024 class. He's a guy that has been on Michigan's radar, but I think Michigan wanted to see him in person, kind of size him up and see really what he is, you know. And but you look at his offer list and you look at his ranking, and some people might wonder because his offer list, Sam, he's got 50 offers. I mean, he's got a lot of offers. So people are wondering, why does the ranking match up with the offers? And I think maybe some question might say, you know, the competition level, or maybe what is his measurables really. And so Michigan got to see him in person. He came up midweek on a trip. They offered him. And so I talked to him after his visit, and he said, Michigan right now is the team to beat for me. And usually when you hear a line like that, that sets out off alarms, and you're like, man, this might be crystal ball time for a guy like that, right? Well, I did a little extra digging and talked to a few more people. I think right now Michigan likes where they sit with wide receiver recruiting and some other guys, and they're taking their time with him. And I think he's also wanting to look at other schools, but we're just being a little more cautious with this recruitment. That's not to say Michigan doesn't like him. Obviously, They offered him, so they definitely didn't like him. But I think they also like a lot of other guys as well. One guy you mentioned, Channing Goodwin and Jordan Shipp. Those are two guys that were just on campus. So they have a lot of options. And I don't think they're rushing at that position at the moment right now. And I think that's why I'm holding off on that pick.
Yeah, it's a great explanation. Terrific, even. I think they're like you, that they're farther down the line with other receivers. Combine that with, if you talk to guys around the network, they say Mekhi White has been on other visits, after which he said that's the number one team on my list. I was talking to Don about it. He said, you know, he's said other schools are the number one team on his list. So he seems to be a kid who is very enamored with whatever school he visits last. That's not to say that he doesn't have sincere feelings about Michigan. I'm sure he does. But it makes you wonder if when he takes the next visit someplace else, is that school going to be the top school on his list? Combine that with, like I said, you know, there are other guys that they've been on a lot longer, that they're farther down the aisle with. I've already had a crystal ball in or a Channing Goodwin for some time. I think you do too, Steve. But I want to be up in my confidence level on that crystal ball. I think Michigan continues to set itself apart. And I think, knowing his dad, I went to Michigan with his dad. He's one of my friends. You know, I remember my first ever trip out west to a football game. My man Goody got me in the game. He got me a ticket to the Washington. He gave me one of his player tickets to the Washington game, right? So that's my guy. And I know that one of the things that they said in recruiting, or in Channing's recruitment, is they don't want him to just go to Michigan because it's Michigan, because his dad went there and because he grew up and that was the school. His dad, his uncle, right? Michigan is the family bloodline. You don't want him to choose it just because of that. You want him to look around and do his due diligence and see other schools. You don't want him to choose it because his dad played for Jim with the 49ers. You want it to be his own decision. But I think the more he sees Michigan, it's just my opinion, the more he sees Michigan, the more it stands out. And I think Michigan, you know, moved the ball further down the line, like I said earlier in this episode last weekend. And I think as they do better with him, I think it affects Jadyn Davis's perception, which is already really high. And Steve, I think it affects Jordan Shipp as well, another receiver that Michigan is high on. Providence Day, visited last weekend, doesn't have the ties though that Channing has, so it's a little bit more convincing to do when it comes to Jordan. Yep.
So yeah, we're talking about the Mekhi White situation. Yeah, there's crystal balls in for Channing Goodwin, Amarian Stewart, like you said, Sam, Jordan Shipp. I think it's Michigan, probably North Carolina. I think NC State has made him a huge priority as well. You have Gatlin Bair, the kid out of Idaho, you know, right? Which he may go on a mission, so I don't know, but Michigan's also supposed to host Ryan Pelham again. They're in the race for a few other. Jeremiah McClellan out of St. Louis is another kid. I mean, there's a lot of other guys that they're still recruiting, guys that they've been recruiting a lot longer, right? Who?
Ryan Wingo.
Yep, Wingo, another St. Louis kid, right? So, Michigan in on quite a bit of guys still, but yeah, there's I'd say between Shipp, Stewart, and Goodwin, there's three guys that feels like they're in pretty darn good shape for. And again, Bair probably top 2. I think Nebraska's another program that's made some inroads there. So I think Michigan in a position to be very, very selective with who else they make a real run at. And like I said, you got guys who are supposed to come up to campus. Pelham came over a year ago, but you want to refresh a kid like that again and get back on his into his top list or whatever. So plenty of names for Michigan to go over at receiver right now, and yeah, they're in really good shape at the receiver spot in 24, right?
Yeah,
better than it feels like receiver always kind of feels like a position of intrigue or mystery. Like they get Carmelo English at the buzzer last cycle. Just feels like it's a position they always make a late run at a guy. Doesn't really seem like that'll be the case this year. I think it'll be if they continue the momentum they have, they may get some of the guys they want here before the season starts, and then be able to make a strong run at one of those 5-star types late. So yeah, I mean, you offer a guy we know it's not always a commit on the spot type offer. And like you said, like you guys have mentioned, it sounds like other schools have felt like they led coming out of those visits in the past, which is another thing we've seen plenty of times over the years in different recruitments. So yeah, I held off. We all held off, and I don't anticipate movement there anytime in the near future for sure, as long as Michigan's continuing to host some of those other guys that I mentioned.
Yeah, you mentioned Gatlin Bair, and I think it's a great one to bring up. I think it gives, because I heard he will do the mission. I think Michigan is anticipating him being a 26. And Brice, the plug there is strong. Colston Loveland, you went out there to see Colston Loveland. You're going to go back out to see Gatlin Bair. I'm not springing anything on you in the podcast.
I know. It's already on the travels agenda.
His coach, the Colston
Loveland
coach is now Gatlin Bair's.
Correct.
Coach. And he is a phenomenal athlete. Heard he beat Roderick Pleasant in the 60-meter. I mean, this dude can fly. He can absolutely fly. And so let's say you get 3 receivers in this class. I think Michigan is the overwhelming leader for Channing Goodwin. I think they are the leader for Amari Unster. That's my opinion. I think they're in good shape with Jordan Shipp, just like Steve said. Hard to see them taking more than 4 receivers in this class, unless one of those receivers, or more than 3 receivers, unless a 4th guy winds up, coming in a couple of years, which what seems to be the case with Gatlin Bair. But the vibe coming out of Idaho, Brice, and you see, this is something you've talked about before. You talked to his coach. Man, Michigan is in really good shape with Gatlin Bair.
Extremely good shape. And large credit goes to Jay Harbaugh, who originally kind of recruited Colston Loveland, got on that recruitment. And the thing about that recruitment that maybe people don't remember so much, but Michigan had to beat some top programs for Colston. I mean, Alabama wanted him. A couple other top schools wanted him. And Jay Harbaugh, the unsung hero, I feel like, on this staff, beat out all those schools for Colston Loveland. And Gatlin Bair has a great relationship, not only with Colston, but with the Michigan program. And I know he's trying to come up this spring, maybe even summer. His coach told me Michigan's definitely going to get an official visit. And that's one of those guys, Sam, like you said, is kind of like they have with Andrew Gentry, where he took a mission. And that's a little different. But when they're recruiting him at the time, you're almost saying, all right, yes, you are committed, but we're not looking at you as a 2024. We're looking at you as a 2026, a guy we can kind of plug away and store away and use further down the road. And he's a freak of an athlete. I mean, you were talking about some of those track times, 6'3", 195 pounds. His coach said he hasn't lost one tick of speed. I mean, he's that fast, that legit. And biggest thing I know people always say is he plays in Idaho. So how good can the competition be? Well, so far, Colston Loveland seems to answer those questions, that it hasn't been a problem for that transition for him. So I tend to side with his coach because he has a pretty good eye. He knew Colston was going to be a top guy. He's been telling me since the day he arrived to Burley, Idaho High School, that Gatlin Bair was going to be a top guy. So, yeah, Michigan with wide receiver recruiting, they have a lot of options. I think at this point, they're just taking their time. They see what's on the board, and they like where they stand. And maybe down the road, they move on Mekhi White. But for the time being, I don't see them making that move to where, they're really rushing to get that commitment at the moment.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I want to get back to the current list of scheduled visitors again, and this a guy that Steve you mentioned. I want to highlight a bit because we always get questions about Dylan Stewart. What's up with Dylan Stewart? Where does Michigan stand with Dylan Stewart? This is an elite guy, but when you're talking about edges, how could you not find Michigan appealing? But they are, I mean, you are dealing with the Titans in this recruitment, Steve. So this is getting them on campus. This is a huge visit for Michigan this weekend.
I saw across the board, but yeah, like you said, Sam, I mean, Michigan should have a lot to pitch here. They will have a lot to pitch, but yeah, I mean, Georgia and Alabama have been frequently involved in this one. Ohio State sniffing around. I guess we're going to call him random 5-star that seems to like South Carolina for some reason this cycle. I don't know if that's related to Nick Harbor signing there or not, but South Carolina is a school that is mentioned quite a bit in his recruitment as well. You guys could correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like he went up to Michigan like a while, like over a year or so ago. I don't know if this is his first visit. I could be totally wrong there, but a guy that Michigan's been recruiting very consistently throughout, as they should. I mean, again, while there should be no reason Dylan Stewart's not interested in Michigan, there should be no reason Michigan's not interested in Dylan Stewart, right? I mean, these are the kind of guys that can put you over the top. So, yeah, got to think Michigan, we've talked before. I mean, think of the list now of edge guys that Michigan can pitch to kids, and just under Jim Harbaugh. It's not an Ohio State pitching Zeke Elliott to running backs still. I mean, these are guys that Jim recruited and coached that are not just in the pros, but are succeeding at a high level, right? And so, Michigan has plenty of ground to stand on with a kid like Dylan Stewart, and you got to think that they'll impress. I'd say Dylan Stewart and Darian Mayo are two of the top 3 or 4 guys at edge for that. I mean, they're that good. Mayo, Stewart, more of your classic 5-star prospect, pretty refined. Probably a guy that could come in and make an impact next year wherever he signs. Mayo, more of maybe not a project per se, but I don't know if he's a first-year guy, but has all the tools to be an absolute star at the college level. So, another position where you got to think Michigan is going to be able to be picky to some extent, but Stewart in particular is a guy, that you're going to make a big run at and hope that, I think, like I said earlier, you can secure an official visit with, and really put yourself in the race for the whatever the home stretch may be for his recruitment.
Yeah, and not visiting this weekend, but relevant when you consider Jordan Marshall is back this weekend. Got a lot of questions, Steve, about a crystal ball out of Texas for Michigan to get Taylor Tatum. This is significant when a Texas guy is talking about one of Texas's top prospects leaning towards going to school up north, namely and especially to Michigan.
So so props to Mike Roach from our Texas affiliate. Did throw in a crystal ball for Taylor Tatum. Kind of came out of nowhere. Obviously, the board reacted strongly to that, as you would expect. Tatum actually ranked higher than Jordan Marshall, and one of the 2 or 3 top ranked running backs in the country. I think almost across the board. But yeah, I think 2 things in that recruitment that have kind of stood out to me. And one was, I think, what we originally talked about when Tatum's recruitment came up was the baseball angle Didn't he? I think he spent time with, is it Tracy Smith, Michigan's baseball manager, right? Which obviously goes to show Michigan's aware of the role that, that baseball is going to play in his recruitment. The other thing, though, that I kind of keep looking at when I think about his recruitment, he went and visited Duke, which not a school you would necessarily think a 5-star level running back is that interested in. It made me kind of wonder if the academic angle is something that does matter to a certain extent. Now, again, I got to assume baseball topic of conversation at Duke too. I don't know if Duke if they have a good baseball program or not, but either way, you see a kid visiting Duke. I think he has a Stanford offer too. I always kind of notice those little things sometimes when you wonder if Michigan really has a shot. I think if I followed up on Mike's crystal ball, I think he did it sort of the Wiltfong way. I think that's what he says is the current pulse of the recruitment right now, but still good enough to put in a prediction. And I don't know if Tatum is coming back up to Michigan this spring. Is he supposed to? I believe he might be coming up sometime in April. But either way, Michigan's got to get one of the two between Tatum and Marshall, just with the success they've had at back, the early identification of both of those guys, and the effort they've put in. I mean, it's another spot at this point where you got to think of running backs, liking the opportunity. Not to mention 2024, anybody who commits and signs out of 24 at back is going to have a very legitimate opportunity to play heavily. Not just play. I mean, you could be talking about if they find the right guy, could be the guy from the get-go, depending on if they go the portal route or somebody steps up on the current roster. But, Tatum, Marshall, those guys got to be thinking they'd be playing immediately if they commit and sign to Michigan. So, yeah, no, very kind of a random occurrence. I don't think we expected to see a crystal ball to Michigan for a guy like Tatum this early, but obviously has to be a good sign. Mike's as plugged in as anybody to the state of Texas as far as high school recruiting goes. So, definitely a noteworthy situation for Michigan there.
Yeah. So listen, folks, loaded visit weekend. We cover all of these to the nth degree with calls, with studio visits, guys, more and more guys coming by the studio every single week. We still have content left from the last week, so be on the lookout for much more from the Underwoods, much more from Brian Robinson. We made it out to see a guy we didn't talk about in this episode, but suddenly Michigan seems more prominent. Never completely off the radar, but seemed more prominent in the recruitment of Brandon Davis Swain. So we spoke to his dad at length, spoke to the young man at length as well, and it is at least a recruitment that it has risen in intensity. If you don't call, each side the favorite of the other, you can at least say that there's more intensity than there had been in the aftermath of the recent visit. So much to come from last week and into this weekend over on the MichiganInsider.com. If you are not a member, what are you waiting on? Just $1 gets you in the door, gets you access to the latest and greatest in football, indoor basketball, and recruiting. We have the beat coverage is second to none with Alejandro and Zach Shaw. Our interns are killing it. Young Davis Mosley on the basketball side of things, got Jay on social media. The team is better and stronger than ever, and the content is outstanding. So, like I said, join in now. $1 gets you in the door, get you all this great recruiting information, get you a spring practice intel, which we're coming with. And once you become a full paying member, you'll also get access to Paramount Plus. So don't miss out. If you like this podcast, be sure to rate it, be sure to review it, tell all your friends about it. They can find it wherever they get their podcasts. It's Google, Stitcher, Spotify, iTunes, you name it. And of course, on YouTube, like the podcast, subscribe to the channel, then you'll get a notification every time we do a new episode. Until that next episode, thanks for watching another edition of the Michigan Recruiting Insider.